Welcome to the Insider's Insight podcast, where we share with you the thoughts of the individuals who are working for projects that are changing the world. Thank you to our sponsor, Creditcoin, the building blocks of trust. For more details, please visit the show notes below. Welcome to Insider's Insight. Today I have Eddie from Immutable X. He is the director of tokens, and we're going to have a conversation about effective altruism and crypto. But before we begin, Eddie, maybe you can give a quick introduction to your journey into crypto, what you were doing before, and how did you end up working in crypto?
Yeah, hi. So firstly, thank you very much for having me. Very, very excited to be here and kind of share my journey into crypto. So I think like most people, I kind of have a crypto investing story or investing lesson that I learned. So I first heard about Ethereum back in 2016. And I think I'd heard about Bitcoin before then. I was like interested in this concept of kind of self-sovereign money. And then, kind of heard there had been these like, I guess, bull and bear market cycles. And, there was kind of use cases in the dark web and things like that. But then a friend told me about Ethereum, the kind of concept of programmable money, and just being able to kind of like the range of things that you could do, the kind of potential use cases I thought was, super exciting. And so I was a uni student at the time, so I put kind of the, amount of savings I could into Ethereum, and then, held it for a while. And kind of mid 2017, I, had, life expenses, I guess, and like things I want to do in terms of travel, and kind of Ethereum had gone nowhere. And I was like, well, I don't really understand this asset class. So I sold, and then saw the 2017 boom. And, that was kind of my first lesson in crypto was, I guess don't sell and kind of have that long-term belief, or like if your conviction or reason for buying the asset hasn't changed, then you should kind of hold to that conviction. And so after the 2017 boom, I was, I guess, very much interested in the industry, looking for ways to get in. And so at the time I was a management consultant, kind of looking, advising big financial services companies and telcos and things like that, kind of like specializing in the data space, so data analytics and kind of data products for those companies. But I was, I guess, curious to get into startups, and then heard about this company, Immutable. And I thought, kind of what they were doing was really interesting. So at the time, it was just after the ERC 721 standard had been invented. So NFTs and the kind of concept of unique digital assets. And, this company had created this game called Gods Unchained, where they were, selling cards or packs of cards to be used in Gods Unchained, which was like a trading card game. And, what was really unique about this was that, of course, we know now that like, players actually own these assets in the game, and are free to kind of trade them like with each other, which was like completely different to the way that the mainstream games industry was set up with, big TCGs like Hearthstone, calling themselves a TCG, a trading card game, but really there's no trading element to it. So they're just kind of collectible card games. And I thought that analogy between, I remember like trading Pokemon cards and Yu-Gi-Oh cards growing up, and like, I guess like how interesting and engaging that could be. And so I thought that was, super interesting. And then talking to the founders, I just got, I guess, more and more excited by their idea and by their vision. So firstly, the company was profitable since they had launched. And I thought, for a startup, that's pretty rare. And they'd done this through this like pre-sale mechanic where, you could kind of sell cards to the game before they'd even like finished or completed building the game. And so it's kind of like this Kickstarter style funding, but instead of like the users just getting a promise of a product that would be delivered, they actually have some sort of like upside or share in that product. So because through the cards, if the game becomes super popular, then the theory was that the cards would become more and more valuable. And you could point to like examples of other trading card games like Magic, where kind of first edition Black Lotus cards are now trading for like tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars. So there was that element. And then the second was kind of their vision, which was, hey, the NFT market is still really early. We know it's really hard to make a good NFT game. Let's build a game ourselves to kind of like demonstrate the value proposition, like show this is something, like show the market that this is something people want, something gamers want. And also like understand what all the problems are from like a technical perspective, from like a game design perspective, and then build like a platform to make it really easy for other people to make NFT games. So that was kind of the vision of the company. So I joined the back end of 2019. And then, it's been an absolute journey since then.
So I just wanted to ask, when the cards initially came on board for the pre-sale, were they already NFTs?
Yeah, they were NFTs.
And Immutable X decided to be a layer 2 on Ethereum. Did that also sway your decision to join them? And how did they come up with that decision rather than just be, say, their own layer 1?
Yeah, so Immutable X wasn't thought of when I joined the company, and I guess what I was saying is we had this idea that we wanted to build an NFT platform and make it easy for people to make mainstream NFT games, but we weren't quite sure what that would look like, and there also weren't enough customers. Like if you tried to launch an NFT platform in kind of 2018, 2019, there's not many people who would be building on top of you. And then, through making Gods Unchained, so I think a unique thing for Gods Unchained compared to a lot of other NFT games out there is that there are a really large volume of NFTs. So I think when I joined, we'd already created 1 million NFTs. It's now, more than 10 million NFTs have been sold in Gods Unchained. And so you have huge volumes of assets. And the average cost of the cards are also quite low. So, this is accessible for mainstream gamers. So, kind of common cards are selling for $1 to $2. And so obviously under kind of this paradigm, when Ethereum scaling started becoming an issue and kind of the cost of transactions just became exorbitantly prohibitive, right? And so the whole secondary marketplace was basically killed, right? Because the cost of trading, if it costs $40 to trade an NFT, then, you're obviously not going to be able to do any trading in Gods Unchained. And so that's when we really latched on to scaling being a big problem that needed to be solved. And then in terms of, how did we make that choice? So I think there are kind of two big things here. So one, I guess the security and trustlessness really mattered to us. I think if we, the whole point of doing this was to give autonomy and ownership to players. And so if we were kind of sacrificing on that, I guess what was the point of the company? And then two is it's very, very hard to build your own layer 1. You need big teams, very specialist engineers, right? It's very hard to build that kind of developer ecosystem and kind of start the flywheel. You need a lot of capital for all those things. And so when the kind of ZK rollup solutions started coming online, that was I guess the perfect solution for us because we could stay on Ethereum, leverage its network effects, but still have the kind of trustlessness and security that we wanted. So we partnered with Starkware to build Immutable X.
It's so interesting that you're sharing this experience because I think for a lot of our listeners, they're quite new to the crypto game. So they might not quite understand all of these different trade-offs that different protocols are making, like the one you said about the security of Ethereum. Do you think it's important for users to understand this? For example, they may look at, say, a Solana and see that it's a really, really fast blockchain, but they may not understand the sacrifices that are coming with it being so fast.
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. I think obviously if we want to get mainstream, then expecting users to understand the deep technical detail, I think is a complete non-starter, right? So, but at the same time, I think security does matter, and people will realize that when there's hacks or security incidents, or people lose their NFTs because of some mistake in a smart contract or things like that. So I think it'll be partly from those experiential learnings that the kind of most secure chains or most decentralized chains will come to the top. And then I think I guess technologically our vision is definitely around this kind of modular blockchain thesis, right? Where you split out, the data layer, the execution layer and the computation layer. And so I think that even other old ones will run into eventually hit the kind of scalability trilemma. And so you really need layer 2s where you can do computation off chain and then settle on chain. I think in my view is kind of the winning architecture over the long term.
You joined Immutable X in 2019, which was very early on in the days of that company. What made you make the move from your management consultancy job to going into this specific startup? Because it's quite a big move and definitely in a very unproven industry. At that time, you just said that the ERC 721 protocol had just been implemented. So really, you probably had no idea that it would be as successful as it is now.
Yeah, that's right. I think it was, it's always been very hard to explain what we do and what the mission of the company is. And I think to have seen it, I guess, be adopted so fast, and the word of the year last year being NFT is just absolutely crazy. In terms of, why I did it. So I think there were a few big things for me. So I'm someone who, really into learning and kind of growth opportunities. And I thought getting in early to start up would be a way to do that. And then secondly, positioning myself in growing industries. And if you can, do that, then there's going to be lots of opportunities for you because you're kind of pushed along by that kind of tailwind. So I think the intersection of gaming and crypto there, I thought was a real good sweet spot. And then finally, so I I went to university with one of the founders, James, and so he was actually the one who got me into Ethereum back in 2016, and so I just had a lot of trust there that it would work out. And I thought, went into it eyes wide open. Most startups fail, and knowing that if we did, then I'd still have this like incredible learning experience behind me. I'd scratch the kind of startup itch and kind of then know with a lot more detail what I wanted to do with the rest of my career.
Wow, that is such an adventure. I mean, the fact that you are, I guess in 2016 or 2017 when you were with the founder and he was pitching you with all of these ideas, you probably had no idea that the space would be where it is now, and that you would be part of one of the biggest protocols or tokens in the industry. It's just funny how the world moves, because I think this is a common theme in many stories I hear from different individuals that have been part of projects like IMX.
Yeah, I think the big lessons are position yourself in a growth industry if you can, and then to listen to your smart friends because they're probably onto something.
Yeah, that's true. So moving on, I want to start the conversation around effective altruism. Maybe you can introduce the concept to our listeners.
Yeah, sure. So effective altruism is this movement that I got into actually in my consulting days. And basically the idea is if you want to do good in the world, or you kind of want to do altruistic things, donate to charity and things like that, then you're kind of taking a data-driven approach to that. So you're kind of looking at how can I do the most good possible, or the most good per dollar spent. And so that's kind of like, I guess, the broad idea of effective altruism. And then within the community, they have like lots of different, I guess, like sub communities depending on kind of like what major problem space they're looking to solve. So there's kind of three main branches. One is looking at like kind of global health and humanitarian causes. One is looking at suffering of non-human animals, so particularly like factory farming and things like that. And the third is looking at the far distant future. So they call that like long-termism. And basically, how do we make sure that the future turns out well and that our, robot overlords don't end up, kind of taking over Earth or punishing us, or, we don't kill ourselves with a nuclear war or pandemic or something like that.
Okay. And when you were working as a management consultant, what would have been the next step in, for example, identifying a cause and then making steps towards achieving or accomplishing your objective? Yeah.
So I think what really caught me was this concept of, sorry, I'm actually blanking on the name now, but earn to give. So the idea that, rather than going to work for some charity, right, and kind of dedicating your time there, you could instead dedicate your time to making as much money as possible, or a lot of money, and then donating a significant portion of that money to then fund charities and fund people to work at charities. So I think, I guess in the crypto space, Sam Bankman-Fried, SBF of FTX, is a effective altruist, and he's kind of that's kind of one of the reasons he got into crypto. Was to do this and to give. And I guess why I found it, why it really grabbed me back as a management consultant was, you're kind of doing this job, you're helping the big corporates, like you're solving interesting problems, like kind of like the hardest problems they have. But I'd really lost touch with who I wanted to be when I was growing up, and like be someone who, leaves the world a better place and like really makes an impact on the world. And hearing that, if you donate just like $5,000, that can save a life. So there's this charity called GiveWell, which is part of an effective altruist charity basically. And what they do, they're like a charity evaluator. So they'll look into all these different charities and actually like do studies, kind of like A/B testing and things like that, as to how effective they actually are. And so then you can know, like, with quite some degree of certainty that, hey, if I put in like $5,000 to this charity, I'll be able to save a life. And I think that having that motivation for being able to like work for something bigger than yourself, I think that was I guess quite motivating for me. And then, you're kind of just not stuck in this rat race or like trying to get to the next level because you want more money or something like that. It's like you actually can have this like quite direct impact on the world. And so then they kind of encouraged me to take this pledge they call giving what we can. And so I donate 10% of my income to the world's most effective charities every year.
Oh, wow. That's interesting. It's quite similar to Shamath. I can't remember his last name. It's
it's from the Social Impact Fund.
He believes in and effective altruism from what you've explained. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's like taking a data-driven approach to giving and trying to be as impactful as possible.
I think that altruism, especially in the crypto space, is really interesting because a lot of crypto participants don't believe that we shouldn't be coerced to give to individuals, but you should create incentives to do so. So have you ever heard of the Green Pill initiative? It was created by the Gitcoin founder.
Yep. Yeah, I know Bankless just started a Green Pill podcast, and I think he's the host. So
yeah, exactly. What do you think about that concept of regenerative finance, which is basically what Gitcoin does? For our listeners, the way it funds projects is it doesn't do it one for one. It uses a quadratic approach. So if, for example, you had an individual who donated $1,000, if that they would basically match that donation. However, if you had a donation made of 1,000 individuals donating $1, when they match that donation, they'll basically multiply it by some sort of formula. So the total pot is way greater. What do you think about those types of concepts?
Yeah, I think they're incredibly fascinating and also incredibly important. So I guess I see, the problem is public goods funding, and how can you get, like you're saying with incentives, how can you create the incentives so that we can create things that everybody benefits from? So, I guess people are familiar with public goods in the real world. So things like, education or going to the beach and things like that. And kind of the way that we've solved that in the real world is through governments and democracy in the West, at least, and kind of like voting for the things we want, and then kind of the government taxes you and allocates funds. So I think that the decentralized way of doing that is obviously very interesting, and I think also very important in the kind of crypto world as well. And I think, Vitalik Buterin is a kind of a big thinker here as well. And, he kind of contrasts the security budget that different chains have. So, they're kind of spending billions of dollars, I forget if it's like per day or per year, on securing the chain, right, through new emissions. But if you contrast that to the amount that's being spent on like funding public goods, it's kind of pretty pitiful. And so what are kind of public goods you need in crypto? Obviously, like funding open source projects is really important, kind of funding client diversity and things like that. And so I think, the way that crypto can kind of experiment in new ways here, I think, and then I'm really excited to see us export that, I guess, to the real world. And then, I think that could be a huge area of impact in the future.
Do you think it's possible? And how would you see it playing out? What I mean by is it possible? I mean, having this altruistic welfare layer without being coerced by a larger institution.
I think so. I think that's, why people are getting so excited by DAOs, obviously decentralized autonomous organizations. And I think we'll set up lots of these kind of like communities or like digital nation states are kind of going to be set up going forward, and being able to have quadratic funding as a mechanism there to kind of like fund different public goods, I think is kind of like, one path. So you kind of build out the digital layer first and then transition to the physical. I'd be really curious if, actual governments would experiment with this type of funding. I think we just need to do way more experiments in terms of how we organize and run society. I think universal basic income is kind of like another area where like experiments are being done there, which is great. But we need to find ways to solve these kind of coordination problems. And I think crypto and crypto incentives are one way to do that.
Have you heard of the proof of humanity protocol?
Yeah, I'm aware of it. So this is the concept of, like you said, so the kind of quadratic funding formula relies on identifying individuals, right? So, and the idea is like if 1,000 people like one thing, then that should be funded more by one big whale who likes a different thing, even if they've got more money. And so you kind of need civil resistance for that to actually work, because otherwise the big whale could split their funds, 1,000 ways, and then they could compete with all the individuals. But if you have like some sort of proof of humanity protocol, you can say, well, no, this is actually a real person. And therefore they kind of get, one person, one vote type things that we have in real world democracies. So I think it's important for that. We've also kind of been looking at it from the, play to earn gaming standpoint. So obviously, once you set up these incentives, botting becomes a real problem where you get bots playing a game just to earn the kind of like play to earn rewards. And so being able to do some sort of proof of humanity on actual players, I think will be a really valuable protocol going forward.
That's shed a lot of different lights onto the whole concept, because when I brought up the proof of humanity, it was just to go into the fact, but they've got this UBI token, which is their first foray into universal basic income. But now that you've spoken about all of these other issues, I think that proof of humanity in itself, it's incredibly important for many other issues.
Definitely, yeah. I think it's going to be if core primitive of these crypto systems, I think as they're built out. And I guess tying all those ideas together as well, I kind of see play-to-earn gaming as a way of doing kind of universal basic income in some ways, where, in the future, if kind of automation means there's going to be large amounts of joblessness, then people are going to need a way to, I guess, engage and challenge themselves and have fun. And I think gaming is a great way to do that. And then being able to actually earn an income from that, I think will be really interesting.
Do you think that there are going to be conflicts between the digital stateless nations and the nation states when it comes to governance and it comes to policies to govern societies?
Yeah, I think almost certainly that the existing powers will push back on, I guess, disruption and kind of new power. I'd be curious to see how it plays out. I mean, we kind of already see corporations are currently more powerful than a lot of governments in some ways. And think of like the big tech companies, right, who could control so much data, influence public elections and things like that. So I think there will be pushback, but it doesn't mean that it will prevent it from occurring. I think that people will find a way to innovate around, and if there's a big enough problem to be solved, then people will go out and solve it.
And apart from the charity that you are donating 10% of your salary towards, are there any initiatives in crypto or out of crypto to do with effective altruism that have really caught your eye and then you're paying a close attention to?
Yeah, so I follow along the effective altruism community and kind of what they're looking into. In particular, I think, long-termism, I guess, as like a tech person who likes thinking about the future, I think is pretty important. So yeah, different things there like AI safety or risk from nuclear war, which I think is particularly relevant today with the Ukraine-Russia conflict, big pandemics. And I think, again, I guess COVID, we kind of had like a test run of that. So I think, following that sort of research, I've been following. I think recently a crypto one I heard about was DeSci. So this is decentralized science. And again, I guess, science is another one of these class of public goods, right? Where, hey, if someone does some fundamental research that creates a breakthrough, then that's something that we all benefit from. And there's also, I guess, lots of incentive problems in the scientific field around, peer review and replication problems in psychology and things like that. And so there's some interesting experiments there in crypto and how can you, fund different types of scientific research? How can you create different, what do they call it, like status? Like, hey, you're a certified so-and-so, or like, you have this credentials, and that's kind of like all living on chain. And then also the like transparency around sharing data from different experiments as well, so that other people can use it. So I think that's, a very exciting area. And because I think, science is kind of the big unlock of all the things that we can do in technology, then improving how we do science, the process of science and the outcomes of science has like potential for like really large impact in the future. But yeah, personally, I'm pretty heads down building at Immutable at the moment. And I think once we are successful, then I'll kind of be thinking about what the next EA project is after that.
Everything that you've just said, I've not really thought about, especially with the DeSci movement. I think that, as a libertarian, I'm personally a libertarian, so it's really hard to think about all of these different movements that will benefit. It's so difficult. For example, I did my CFA level 3, and I realized that the way that these credentials hold so much power, it's ridiculous. Because, in order for you to get the qualification, you basically have to pay a yearly fee. And I think that must be the case for almost all of these professional qualification boards. And although these credentials are important, the fact that centralized institutions hold so much power, I don't think that's good for the overall environment, if that kind of makes sense.
It does. I think it holds back innovation and, they become gatekeeper, right?
Exactly. And I think these problems need to be tackled because you don't really want any one institution to be a gatekeeper of knowledge or your personal future. And so it's definitely something that I think people should be thinking about. Do you think that education plays a part in this? Because, I think most individuals rely on another institution to make these breakthroughs. Whereas if everyone was thinking about these problems, even if it was in their periphery, we might be able to solve these problems faster and in a much more equitable way.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. yeah, it's hard because, you know, society is so big, and I think, you know, there's already such problems with polarization and bipartisanship and things like that. But in general, education being a solve for those things, I would agree is important. But I think, yeah, in terms of like change, I think getting really motivated people, really motivated and smart people who want to solve these problems and getting them working on solutions that make it easy for everyone else to do, I think is kind of a good approach. You know, I think this classic example there is the kind of Tesla approach to solving electric cars, right? If you can make it sexy and statusy and, you know, just better to have an electric car than a petrol car, then people will start going that way. And I think, yeah, again, that kind of gets back to crypto incentives and regenerative finance. So how can you make it such that people will just do it because it's easier or better?
Eddie, before I let you go, I just have one question left for you, which is, what do you think is going to be the big craze in 2022 in the crypto space? So we had NFTs, we had DeFi, we had GameFi. What are you thinking is ripe for explosion this year?
Good question. I think for us, and yeah, me personally, I'm really excited to see high quality games with real utility for NFTs being built. I think at the moment, it's still a lot of hype. NFTs are a lot of hype, and there's a lot of profile pictures and like scarce assets and things like that. But really seeing the first game that nails it and does go mainstream in a big way, in the sense that like actual gamers start playing and actual gamers start seeing the benefits of NFTs and digital ownership. I think that's what I'll be most looking forward to in 22.
Oh, awesome. Eddie, do you have any socials you'd like to shout out? Any websites?
Yeah, definitely. So, you know, please follow Immutable. At Immutable is our Twitter handle. We also have 2 games. So at Gods Unchained is our original TCG that I mentioned at the start. And then we have a new game at Guild of Guardian on Twitter, which is going to be mobile-based MMORPG. That one's going to be really big. And then, yeah, personally, if you want to hear more from me, would love to follow it at Eddie_Burrowes. That's EDDIE_BURROWES.
Perfect. I'm going to put all of those links in the show notes below. Well, thank you so much, Eddie, for being part of Insider's Insight. And hopefully we can have this conversation again in a year's time or so, where you can update our audience on the progress that you've been making, IMX have been making, and the whole effective altruism space has been making.
I'd love that. Thank you so much for having me. This was really fun and some really interesting questions.
Thank you. See you all next time. Bye, guys.
See ya. Bye.
The Insider's Insight podcast is meant for informational purposes only and should not be considered as financial or investment advice. Nothing expressed in this podcast should be construed as a solicitation, recommendation, endorsement, or offer to buy or sell any financial products. Information expressed by the host or guest of this podcast does not necessarily reflect any views of our sponsors.